and always had a smile that charmed everyone in the room. My parents adored her. They framed every one of her awards and plastered her pictures all over the house. My own achievements? They were met with indifference.
Why are you even trying? You'll never be as good as your sister.
Birthdays were the clearest reminder of how little I mattered. When Grace turned 15, my parents threw her a grand party and gifted her a car. For my 10th birthday, they forgot entirely. Mom, is there a cake for my birthday?
Oh, stop bothering me. I'm busy.
I didn't even receive a wish from any of them. Of course, Grace hated me too. After all, I destroyed her only child position. It wasn't just about the celebrations, it was how they treated me daily. If Grace spilled juice on the carpet, my parents laughed it off.
Kids will be kids.
Ugh, she's so cute, our clumsy princess.
But if I so much as dropped a glass, the response was different.
Anna, you're so stupidly clumsy. Clean that up right now.
Punishments for me were swift and harsh. I was grounded for days for the smallest mistakes. Grace? She got a gentle talk, maybe a hug if she cried. Meals were another battleground. My parents always served Grace first, giving her the best portions. I often got whatever was left. I was a mistake. My parents never said it outright, but their actions spoke louder than words ever could. My sister Grace was their golden child. She was born at the perfect time, when they were young, successful, and ready to embrace parenthood. Then I came along, unplanned and unwanted, 5 years later. From the moment I could understand the world around me, I knew I didn't belong. My earliest memories were filled with contrasts like Grace basking in our parents' affection while I was relegated to the shadows, and comparisons.
Anna, stop making a mess. Why can't you be more like Grace?
Grace could do no wrong. She got straight A's, played the piano like a pro, and always had a smile that charmed everyone in the room. My parents adored her. They framed every one of her awards and plastered her pictures all over the house. My own achievements? They were met with indifference.
Why are you even trying? You'll never be as good as your sister.
Birthdays were the clearest reminder of how little I mattered. When Grace turned 15, my parents threw her a grand party and gifted her a car. For my 10th birthday, they forgot entirely. Mom, is there a cake for my birthday?
Oh, stop bothering me. I'm busy.
I didn't even receive a wish from any of them. Of course, Grace hated me too. After all, I destroyed her only child position. It wasn't just about the celebrations, it was how they treated me daily. If Grace spilled juice on the carpet, my parents laughed it off.
Kids will be kids.
Ugh, she's so cute, our clumsy princess.
But if I so much as dropped a glass, the response was different.
Anna, you're so stupidly clumsy. Clean that up right now.
Punishments for me were swift and harsh. I was grounded for days for the smallest mistakes. Grace? She got a gentle talk, maybe a hug if she cried. Meals were another battleground. My parents always served Grace first, giving her the best portions. I often got whatever was left.
Grace needs her strength. She's our future.
I didn't know what that made me, but it was clear I wasn't their priority. The worst part was how openly they favored Grace in public. At school events, they would cheer the loudest for her, while I stood on the sidelines, pretending it didn't hurt.
That's our girl. Grace, you're amazing.
When my turn came, they barely clapped. I stopped inviting them to my events altogether. The divide between us grew deeper as we got older. Grace thrived in the favoritism. She didn't need to work hard for their love. It was given freely. She basked in their attention and used it as a weapon against me.
Mom and Dad say I'm the smart one. Why don't you just stop trying? I'm 5 years older than you. I'm more beautiful, brilliant, and everyone loves me more. I have everything you can only wish for.
Her words stung, but I couldn't blame her entirely. She was just repeating what our parents had always made clear. There was one day I'll never forget. Grace had just won a regional spelling bee. My parents decided to take her out for a celebratory dinner at an expensive restaurant. I wasn't invited.
Stay home and do the dishes, Anna. This is Grace's moment. Don't ruin it for us. You're lucky enough to have been sent into this family by your creator. Make them proud and be obedient, will you?
I watched from the window as they drove off, leaving me alone in the house. That night, I made myself a peanut butter sandwich and cried myself to sleep. Even my room was a testament to their favoritism. Grace had a spacious, brightly lit room decorated with posters of her favorite musicians and shelves lined with trophies. I was given the smaller, darker room at the back of the house, with peeling wallpaper and a broken lamp they never bothered to fix.
You don't need anything fancy. Be grateful you have a roof over your head.
Gratitude. That's what they always demanded from me. Gratitude for the scraps of attention they threw my way. Gratitude for being allowed to exist in their home. Once, I overheard my parents talking late at night.
We shouldn't have had a second child. Things were perfect with Grace.
I know. Anna was a mistake, but we're stuck with her now. Let's try not to make another mistake. I can't deal with two Annas.
Hearing those words felt like a knife to my heart. They didn't see me as their daughter. I was a burden, a constant reminder of something they didn't want. The few moments I tried to bond with them ended in rejection. One summer, I asked my dad to teach me how to ride a bike, something he had done with Grace years earlier.
I'm too busy. Ask Grace to teach you.
Grace never had to ask for their time. It was given freely. I learned to stop asking. The emotional neglect turned into something more sinister as I grew older. My parents started blaming me for everything that went wrong in the house. If the bills were late, if the house was messy, if Grace was upset, it was always my fault.
If we didn't have to deal with you, life would be so much easier.
School became my refuge. Teachers praised my efforts, and friends offered me the kindness I never got at home. But even that wasn't safe from my parents' disdain.
Don't think good grades will make you better than Grace. She's still our star.
No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't win. The final straw came on a rainy afternoon when I accidentally broke Grace's favorite vase. She had been showing it off all week, a gift from our parents for her latest achievement. I didn't mean to knock it over, it was an accident. When my parents saw the shattered pieces, their anger was like a storm.
How could you? Do you know how expensive that was?
You're nothing but trouble, Anna.
I tried to explain, but they wouldn't listen.
She's just jealous because I'm better than her.
That night, they sent me to bed without dinner. I lay in the darkness, tears streaming down my face, wondering why I was even born. I realized something that night. I couldn't change them. I couldn't make them love me. But I could survive. I would find my own way, my own happiness, away from their shadows. When Grace got into college, she began wanting more, even though our parents practically handed everything to her. She craved more attention, power, and the thrill of getting away with anything. I didn't think much of it when she started hanging out with a new group of loud, flashy, and reckless friends. They came to the house once or twice, laughing and acting like they owned the world. My parents never questioned her choices. They would say she knew what she was doing and that she was just having fun. But Grace didn't know what she was doing. She was spiraling into something dangerous, and my parents were too blinded by their love for her to see it. It all started with money disappearing from my parents' account. Small amounts at first, but it grew larger every month. They thought it was an error.
I'll call the bank tomorrow. It's probably nothing serious.
Then one day, I overheard Grace on the phone in her room, talking about some big score and easy cash. I didn't know what it meant. When I tried to tell my parents, they dismissed me, as always.
Stop making up stories about your sister. You're just trying to get her in trouble.
2 weeks later, the police showed up at our doorstep. My parents were confused at first, standing in their perfect living room with their perfect daughter. But when the officers asked for Grace, everything shattered.
Miss Grace, you're under arrest for fraud, theft, and conspiracy.
What? This must be a mistake. Grace would never do such a thing.
But it wasn't a mistake. Grace had been stealing money from my parents and even went as far as borrowed money using their names without their knowledge. She used their accounts to fund her schemes, leaving them in debt. Thousands of dollars were gone, and Grace was at the center of it all. My parents begged the officers to let her go, but the evidence was overwhelming. Grace was taken away, leaving behind a trail of disbelief and devastation. She was found guilty in court and sentenced to 10 years in jail. In the days that followed, our house was eerily silent. My parents were consumed by guilt and despair. For the first time, they couldn't brush away the truth. Their perfect daughter wasn't so perfect after all.
She ruined us. What are we going to do?
We trusted her. How could she do this to us?
The debt Grace left behind was crushing. My parents had to sell some of their belongings to keep up with the payments. They even talked about selling the house. They were broken, not just financially, but emotionally. And that's when they turned to me. One evening, my mother knocked on my door. It was rare for her to come to my room, let alone speak to me in such a soft tone.
I know we haven't always treated you right, but we need you now. We're a family, and we need to stick together.
Her words made me laugh bitterly. And from the look on her face, it wasn't the reaction she expected. A family? Since when have we been a family?
We're sorry, Anna. We know we've been unfair to you, but we want to make things right.
Make things right? You mean now that Grace isn't here to be your perfect child? Now that you're drowning in debt because of her? Don't think you can suddenly use me as a replacement.
We've made mistakes, Anna, but we're trying.
No. You're not trying for me. You're trying because you have no one else. Where was this effort when I needed it? When I was the one crying in my room while you doted on Grace. Keep treating me the way you always have. I don't want your pity now. Moreover, I am moving out of your house. For your information, I have been working online for a while now and have saved enough to rent an apartment. I walked past them, leaving them speechless in my room. For once, I wasn't the one seeking their approval. I wasn't the one begging for scraps of their love. In the weeks that followed, they tried again and again to reach out to me. My mother cooked meals and invited me to join them at the table. My father asked about my schoolwork and offered to help, but I kept my distance. I wasn't ready to forgive them, and I wasn't sure if I ever would. Grace's arrest left scars that would never fully heal. My parents had to confront the reality they had spent years ignoring: their favoritism, their neglect, their misplaced trust. The police informed us that they discovered Grace was 3 weeks pregnant. Grace was pregnant and didn't even know who the father was. This news broke my parents even more. Whenever she gives birth, the child will be brought to my parents. The news saddened them, as they were already drowning in debt. Due to the money my parents were paying to cover their debt, they became broke. I heard they sold their house and now live in a one-bedroom flat with neighbors who play loud music all night. They had to look for jobs to sustain themselves. I heard my dad now drives a garbage truck, while my mom works as a maid for a wealthy family. Rumor has it that she is treated poorly in the house, but she has to keep the job to survive. As for me, I finally moved out and began to find my own strength. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had survived their rejection, and now I was learning to thrive despite it. As part of my revenge, I anonymously posted my dad's number online as a garbage collector. I heard he has been receiving non-stop calls to pick up trash, and he eventually had to change his phone number. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living in Grace's shadow, and I wasn't going to let anyone, not even my parents, dim my light again. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below, saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.
Sick? I don't care. You're coming with me this minute. Before I knew what was happening, the man lifted me effortlessly and threw me on his right shoulder. Immediately, he left my house, ignoring my cries of pain. We arrived at the company, and I was carried to the marketing department. He dumped me on my seat. Start working! I had no idea how to react. I found myself typing. However, with each second that passed, I was getting weaker. A few minutes later, I blacked out. The next time I opened my eyes, I realized I was at the hospital. I received my letter of dismiss there, and I couldn't be happier. I chose being jobless over getting killed by having a job. Two years ago, I got a job at a famous chocolate-making company. Before then, I'd used 2 whole years searching for jobs around after finishing college. It was a trying period, and I was desperate to do any job I got. When I got the job at the company as one of the marketers, I was overjoyed. I screamed and jumped in happiness, as it was my dream to be a marketer. That company? Bro, can you cope there? When I announced the news to my friends, they had quite a lot to say about the manager. Apparently, 2 out of my 3 friends knew people who'd worked there and had to leave because of the man. My cousin had to attend therapy sessions for 6 months to get over what he did to her. He's a cruel asshole. No one can report him because he's also very manipulative. Even more, the owner trusts him completely, and everyone he's bullied knows it's a waste of time to try reporting him. The whole thing sounded weird and unbelievable. I mean, there's no way 3 people would report him, and all 3 would be termed liars. Also, couldn't they think of a way to get evidence to prove that the man was evil as they claimed? I concluded that their stories were stupid. I was going to take the job and see for myself if the man was as ruthless as they claimed. I resumed the next day. The first person I encountered was a man with a very good build. He was tall and very muscular. He also had a few strands of gray in his hair. I could see everyone who passed him, bowing their heads to greet him. I immediately concluded that he was the CEO of the company. I was about to approach him when I was stopped by his sudden yell. "How dare you drop my bag? You're fired! Fuck out of here this minute!" I was shocked. The worker behind him, who I hadn't noticed earlier, had accidentally dropped his bag. I was confused on how he could fire her for that. Another worker, without being told, quickly approached them and took the bag from the lady. Afterward, she turned and walked out in tears. I stood in shock and watched as the man made his way in. Once he got to the elevator, everyone moved away, giving him space. When the elevator opened, those inside quickly rushed out, giving him the chance to use it alone. A thought crossed my mind about him being the manager my friends told me about, but I shook it off. There was no way a manager could have that much authority. Once he'd left in the elevator, the workers heaved a collective sigh. It was obvious that they were scared of him, from their body movements and facial expressions. I approached one of them. "Hi, bro. I just got employed yesterday and it's my first day at work." "Who was that man from earlier?" "That's Mr. William. He's the manager here. In anything you do, avoid him. Even the slightest mistake will make him fire you. He just fired our best marketer for accidentally dropping his bag." Hearing that made me both shocked and scared. My friend's stories were slowly starting to seem true. The man was indeed cruel. However, I hadn't even started working yet. I couldn't give up so soon. As I stepped into the elevator with some colleagues, I resolved within myself to avoid the man as much as I could. Even if I did come across him, I would make sure to do everything I could to not make any mistakes. I walked into the marketing department, and the head of the team approached me. I was assigned to my desk and given the rulebook. I was also given some things to type out. However, the man instructed me to go through the rulebook first, before doing anything. Going through it, my mouth hung open. The rules were outrageous. First, we had no sick leave. How could sick leaves be canceled? I left my seat and went to the leader. "I'm sorry, but it says here that there's no sick leave. How's that possible?" "Well, the manager canceled that for marketers. We have to ensure our chocolate is leading in the markets. We ensure to not fall sick. However, when we do, we treat ourselves here at work." The whole thing didn't seem normal to me. What if it's a serious case and you have to go to a hospital? Well, we make sure it doesn't get to that point by going for a full-body checkup monthly. Please, return to your seat and finish reading. We have a lot to do. After work that day, though it was too stressful. I returned home very tired and unable to even take my night bath. I fell asleep immediately my body touched my bed. The next morning, I was forced to wake up by 6 a.m., have a quick bath, and put on any outfit my hands chose. I had to be at work by 7:30 a.m. I left home around 7 a.m. and quickly got a cab that dropped me at work 5 minutes before the set time. That day was the beginning of my life in hell. I thought I'd be able to excuse myself and get breakfast, but I wasn't allowed. The permission to eat was only from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. I hadn't had dinner the previous night. The thought of not having breakfast, too, broke my heart. I managed to work until it was lunchtime. I felt my energy return after lunch, but it all went away by the time I was done for the day. My body was stiff, and the most stressed out it had ever been. However, when I got home, I didn't make the mistake to sleep off immediately, no matter how sleepy I was. I got my clothes for the next day out and had dinner before I finally slept. The next day, I woke even earlier, had a quick bath, got dressed, fixed breakfast for myself before leaving. My life continued that way, each day coming with even more stress. I could barely see my friends anymore. The only day of the week which I was free, I used it to sleep to my satisfaction. I was getting drained, and I knew it. I always had to down pills for headaches and body pains. I would leave, but I was scared of going back to being jobless. Those 2 years I spent being jobless were horrible. However, having a job wasn't even any better. The only advantage I had was the high payment I received bi-weekly. I knew they paid so much to keep the workers tied to them. For 2 months, I managed to avoid the manager. However, in my 3rd month of working, life happened and I was forced to finally face him. We'd been working on a new way to push our product even higher, and we finally found a way. We needed to have a meeting with the manager for finalization. I dreaded the day until it finally came. And who are you, lanky boy? Are you new here? Before going to work at the company, I was quite fleshy. However, the stress and everything that came from the job had caused me to lose weight so much that I had become lanky with bulgy eyes. Yes, sir. I began working here 3 months ago. Oh, come up here and open the meeting then. I'd expected that. The leader had informed me prior that he'd want to test my capacity by doing that. However, I was advised again, making my opening perfect. I had to make a mistake to give him something to correct me about. If it were perfect, I'd be targeted by him and tortured verbally until I had to leave the company. He hated to see people better than him. I followed the advice and didn't go overboard. Of course, he had a correction. He yelled while correcting me, but I didn't mind. The meeting was filled with so much yelling and insults, but he finally accepted our idea. I later got to know that he was simply yelling to make us feel our idea was good, but not up to his taste, and he was only agreeing to it because he pitied us. It was crazy. Fast forward to my 6th month. I was getting even worse. I developed insomnia, bad posture, etc. I even began losing my hair rapidly as a result of how stressed I was. Regardless of what I saw the job doing to my health, I didn't quit. One day, my body gave up on trying to hold it in, and I fainted in my room. Fortunately, I woke up a few minutes later. I knew it would be a suicide attempt to go to work that day. I would call the company, but I realized I hadn't had the time to exchange contact with anyone in my department. I decided to receive treatment that day and resume work the next day. Weekly, I reached for my phone and called my personal doctor. He promised to be at my house in an hour. I managed to leave my bed and get a cup of tea while watching TV and waiting for my doctor's arrival. However, 30 minutes later, I suddenly heard the doorbell ring. Though my doctor had arrived earlier, so I forced myself up and went to get the door. However, I was shocked to see the manager standing in front of me. I moved back in fear, and he followed me.
How dare you skip work, huh?
Sir, I'm sick.
Sick? I don't care. You're coming with me this minute.
Before I knew what was happening, the man lifted me effortlessly and threw me on his right shoulder. Immediately, he left my house, ignoring my cries of pain. We arrived at the company, and I was carried to the marketing department. He dumped me on my seat.
Start working!
I had no idea how to react. I found myself typing. However, with each second that passed, I was getting weaker. A few minutes later, I blacked out. The next time I opened my eyes, I realized I was at the hospital. I received my letter of dismiss there, and I couldn't be happier. I chose being jobless over getting killed by having a job. It didn't end there. Once I was discharged, I filed a case of emotional abuse, assault, and physical abuse on workers. I managed to get the previous workers to come in as witnesses, and they agreed, as they were also tired of his wickedness. And I also found nearly all of the previous workers he'd assaulted, and the case was taken to court. The CEO was shocked to see the video of him carrying me out of my house against my wish, which was caught by my CCTV cameras. He was even more shocked by the testimonies of all the workers, which were nearly 100. The court sentenced him to 10 years imprisonment with hard labor. All of his money and investment were also shared between all affected workers, leaving his family who depended on him with nothing. His wife was furious after finding out how horribly her husband had been treating workers and filed for divorce. The CEO also gave me my job back. Due to how well I'd performed at work, more than the old workers, I was promoted to the post of the marketing leader. I didn't think the punishment was enough for the manager, so I went to visit him in prison and told him of my new position. I could see how angry he looked, but I just laughed before I left. I paid some of the wardens to torture him for a week straight. The next week, when I visited again, I was happy to see the marks and injuries all over his body. I'm sure by the time he is out of there, he will be more humble. The company became a safe and enjoyable place to work at. We later heard my boss was nicknamed the Wicked Boss by other inmates and was bullied in prison, and occasionally his food will be seized by other inmates. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel.
The moment I was placed in her arms, she looked at me with disgust. There was no love or joy in her eyes, just a deep, unyielding anger.
Great. Not only are you a mistake, but you're also defective.
She never held me the way a mother should. She never soothed me when I cried or comforted me when I was scared. Instead, she ignored me or punished me for things I couldn't control. If I didn't understand something fast enough, she would yell at me. If I didn't do something the right way, she would punish me, as though I was deliberately trying to disappoint her. As I grew, her resentment turned into cruelty. She never enrolled me in school. She didn't care that I had the potential to learn and grow. She just saw me as a burden. When I asked about school or if I could play with other children, she told me it was pointless.
What's the point? You're never going to be anything anyway. You'll never amount to anything. The kids are going to get bored of you. Why bother them? Stay indoors and rot. Why do I even bother?
When I made a mistake, whether it was spilling a glass of water or not cleaning my room well enough, she would punish me in extreme ways. Hi, my name is Jennifer, and I've lived a life of rejection, neglect, and abandonment. Most people would think that a mother should love and protect her child no matter what, but I was never given that privilege. My mother, Sarah, didn't love me. She resented me, hated me, in fact. She couldn't stand that I existed, and it wasn't just because I had Down syndrome. I ruined her life, or at least that's what she always told me. To understand why she hated me so much, you have to know how I came into this world. It wasn't the story of a loving couple bringing a child into the world with hope and excitement. No, my story started with a mistake. At least, to her it was. Sarah was rebellious from the start, the black sheep of the family. She didn't want to live by anyone's rules, especially her parents, who were strict, old-fashioned people. At the age of 20, she decided to leave everything behind, her home, her family, the small-town life that was choking her spirit. She wanted more than what her parents expected of her, and she thought she'd find it in the big city. It didn't take long for her to meet someone who promised her the excitement she craved. His name was Jack, and he was everything she wanted. Their affair was nothing more than a brief fling, but it would have lifelong consequences. When Sarah found out she was pregnant, her world collapsed. The life she had envisioned was gone in an instant. She was 21, pregnant, and scared. She thought about aborting me but couldn't bring herself to go through with it. Instead, she chose to keep me, but her bitterness grew every day. She began telling me how everything is my fault right from when she was still pregnant with me. She would always say how I ruined everything from her, as if I'd personally asked to be brought to Earth. When I was born, she wasn't happy. I wasn't the beautiful, healthy baby she'd hoped for. I had Down syndrome, a diagnosis that made her hate me even more. The moment I was placed in her arms, she looked at me with disgust. There was no love or joy in her eyes, just a deep, unyielding anger.
Great. Not only are you a mistake, but you're also defective.
She never held me the way a mother should. She never soothed me when I cried or comforted me when I was scared. Instead, she ignored me or punished me for things I couldn't control. If I didn't understand something fast enough, she would yell at me. If I didn't do something the right way, she would punish me, as though I was deliberately trying to disappoint her. As I grew, her resentment turned into cruelty. She never enrolled me in school. She didn't care that I had the potential to learn and grow. She just saw me as a burden. When I asked about school or if I could play with other children, she told me it was pointless.
What's the point? You're never going to be anything anyway. You'll never amount to anything. The kids are going to get bored of you. Why bother them? Stay indoors and rot. Why do I even bother?
When I made a mistake, whether it was spilling a glass of water or not cleaning my room well enough, she would punish me in extreme ways. One time, I accidentally broke her favorite vase while dusting. She didn't speak to me for days after that. She locked me in my room, refusing to feed me. When she did let me out, she told me I was a failure.
You can't do anything right. You don't deserve anything from me.
It wasn't just neglect. It was active hatred. She took pleasure in my suffering. Every time I would reach out for affection, she would pull away. I learned to stop trying because it only made things worse. By the time I turned 10, things had only gotten worse. Sarah had met a man named Victor. He was different from Jack. He was controlling and manipulative, but Sarah was in love with him, or at least she thought she was. When they started dating, she changed. She became more distant and cold, and the cruelty she showed me became even more pronounced. Victor didn't like me. He didn't like that I existed. He thought I was a hindrance to Sarah's freedom, and Sarah, desperate to keep him in her life, agreed.
Get rid of the kid. She's just a burden.
It didn't take long for Sarah to make a decision. One evening, she told me we were going somewhere. I thought it was a treat, maybe to the park or the zoo. But instead, she took me to an unfamiliar building. When I asked where we were going, she didn't answer. She just kept walking until we entered the building, and she handed me over to a woman.
Take care of her. She's yours now.
And then she turned around and walked out without even a second glance. I called out for her, cried, and begged her to come back, but she didn't even slow down. I was left in a strange place, surrounded by people I didn't know, with no idea what was happening. The woman, who was a staff member at the orphanage, looked at me with pity but didn't say anything. She just took my hand and led me inside. I waited. For days, I waited, thinking that Sarah would come back for me. I told myself that it was all a mistake, that she was just temporarily upset, but she never came back. It wasn't until much later that I realized what had happened. Sarah had abandoned me, not because she couldn't care for me, but because she didn't want me. She had finally chosen Victor over me, and I was nothing more than an obstacle in her pursuit of happiness. The orphanage became my new home. It wasn't perfect, but for the first time, I was treated with kindness. I met other children who were like me, children who had been abandoned by their families, children who understood what it felt like to be rejected. But the scars my mother left on me ran deep. Every time I looked at myself in the mirror, I heard her voice.
You're worthless. You'll never be good enough for anyone.
After spending a whole year at the orphanage, I was finally adopted by a middle-aged couple. They were kind, with gentle faces and warm hearts. Rob and Mary had already raised their children, all of whom were adults with lives of their own. They wanted to open their home to someone who needed care, and they chose me. They were patient and understanding with me. They enrolled me in a special school. My new brothers and sisters, even though they were much older than me, treated me with the same kindness and love they had for their own children. I never lacked for affection. They treated me as their own, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly loved. In their home, I found peace. I forgot about Sarah. I forgot the cruelty, the neglect, the hatred she had held for me. In my new home, I had challenges that came with having Down syndrome. But Rob and Mary never treated me as anything less than capable. They nurtured my dreams, encouraged me to pursue what I wanted in life, and showed me the value of hard work and dedication. I eventually went on to run my own business at age 24. I also started an NGO that provided support for children with special needs, making sure they had access to the resources they deserved. My life wasn't perfect, but it was full. I had purpose, I had love, and I felt complete. I thought I had finally escaped my past, but then everything changed. Sarah suddenly showed up. I was shocked, wondering what she was doing at my office. She was looking older, worn down. The woman who had once been my mother, who had abandoned me without a second thought. And then, my gaze shifted to the 3 teenagers standing beside her. They were all quiet, their eyes downcast. They looked so lost, so helpless. I knew immediately who they were. They were her children. What do you want?
Jennifer, I'm so sorry for coming here. I know it's shameless of me to show myself to you, but I need your help.
I couldn't move. The anger I had buried deep inside me flared to life. My help? After everything you've done to me?
I didn't mean it like that. I need someone to help me with them. These are my kids. They're triplets and disabled, as you can see. I need you to help me with them.
I looked at the teenagers again. They were so quiet, their faces full of confusion and uncertainty. They looked lost, just like I had once felt. I immediately understood what she meant. I can't believe you. You want to leave them at my foundation, don't you? How could you be so cruel?
No, I just can't do it on my own anymore. Victor, he left me. He couldn't handle it, Jennifer. He couldn't handle them. He said they're imbeciles. Even though they're his kids, he couldn't stand them.
Her words hit me like a slap in the face. Imbeciles. She was still calling her own children that? I could feel the anger rising up inside me, burning hotter with every passing second. How dare you? You left me. You abandoned me when I needed you. And now you're asking me to help you with this? To take them off your hands the way you took me to that orphanage?
I didn't want it to be this way. I never wanted to abandon you. I just didn't know what to do.
No, you don't get to play the victim here. You abandoned me. You're planning to abandon them. You never cared. You still don't. And now you want my help after everything? You're the one who needs to deal with this. Not me. She began sobbing.
I can't do this alone. I met someone, a man. He's nice. But if he knows about them, he'll never want me. I can't lose him, Jennifer. Please, please help me.
She was trying to get rid of them to make room for some man. The same thing she did to me. You're still the same. You haven't learned a thing. You haven't changed. You're still trying to run away, just like you ran from me.
Please, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything, Jennifer. I was wrong. I know that now.
I didn't believe her, not for a second. But something inside me snapped, and I acted on pure instinct. I raised my hand and slapped her hard. You don't get to do this. You don't get to leave them the way you left me. You owe them, Sarah. You owe them everything. You're going to take care of them.
But how will I even do that?
Don't you dare yell at me. I'll help you find a job. But if you try to leave them again, if you try to abandon them like you did me, I swear I'll make sure the police find you. You'll pay for what you've done.
Okay, I'll do anything. Please just help me. Help me do better.
I couldn't forgive her, not at all. But I wasn't going to let her abandon these children, not again. I'll help you, but only if you promise to do right by them. If you try to leave them, remember that I'll make sure the authorities know where you are. She nodded, already sobbing. I didn't know if she was truly sorry or if she was just scared, but I wasn't about to let her off easy. I helped Sarah find a job, not a fancy one, but as a cleaner at our NGO. It was something simple but steady, and I made sure she faced the consequences of her actions. Every day, I checked on her, ensuring she didn't slip back into her old ways. She wasn't perfect, but she was trying, and maybe that was enough for now. She had to take good care of her kids or face the wrath of the cops. Her new boyfriend eventually found out about her triplets and abandoned her, leaving her with no choice but to work as a cleaner to support them. I know it's not easy doing such job and taking care of 3 special need kids, but she deserves it. I made sure she didn't get any extra privileges. Sometimes colleagues would ask if she was really my mother, and I would deny it. Thanks for watching.
In an attempt to silence me. Why can't you be as calm and polite as Nikki? All you know how to do is complain.
If you're so unhappy in this family, leave. Anyway, you don't contribute much to the household. You're more of a hindrance.
The problem began with threats to refuse to pay for my university expenses and ended with my parents kicking me out of the house as soon as I turned 18. It was a terrible time for me. With nowhere to go and not enough money to sustain myself, I had to rely on all my ingenuity to avoid ending up on the streets. I don't think I come from a dysfunctional family, or at least I didn't think so when I was little. My family always treated me well, providing me with all the love and care necessary despite never being in the best economic situation. And indeed, that's how it continued during the first years of my life, in a practically idyllic harmony where, although I was never the favored one at home, they never denied me basic attention. Everything began to change, without me even realizing it, when my brother Nicky was born. Now that you're going to become a big brother, you'll have to take on more responsibilities and help us always ensure his well-being. Understood? My father stated this with pride, thus passing on his own excitement about having a new member in the family to me. And although at first I didn't understand why everyone was so excited, soon the reason why all the adults around me were so thrilled became clear. This is something I learned many years later, well into adolescence, but my own birth was not planned. Rather, it was the result of a careless night of partying and drunkenness. There was nothing wrong with it. Or, better said, I didn't think there was anything wrong with it at that time. But many things that I considered as unchangeable truths in my early youth would soon be shaken. Nicky turned out to be the perfect child in my parents' eyes, not only because of his beauty, but also because of his friendly character and all the successes he seemed destined to achieve from a very young age. Not only my parents, but everyone who knew him didn't hesitate to shower him with compliments, praising him for his good looks and his good behavior. Soon, the comparisons began.
Caleb, why can't you be a bit more like your brother? Look how sociable he is. They've barely met the neighbor's son and they're already playing as if they've been friends for a lifetime.
But Mom, he's 3 years old. Anyone who approaches you at 3 years old, you consider them your friend. Not only should you be more sociable, but also improve your grades. Who goes to 3rd grade and doesn't have an A in all subjects? Surely Nicky could do better. He can already read and do sums. He's way ahead of his peers. He actually only knows a few letters and can count to 10.
Jealousy is a very bad thing, son. It corrodes the soul.
Perhaps my mother was right, and feeling jealous was a waste of time. But my relatives did nothing to prevent me from feeling overshadowed by my younger brother. On the contrary, whenever Nicky did something even remotely praiseworthy, no matter how routine or irrelevant it seemed to me, they found a way to turn it into a commendable feat. The comparisons became a daily occurrence. At first, they were minor things like, "Why can't you clean your room as neatly as your brother?" Or, "You need to dress better. You have enough decent clothes not to go around looking like a vagabond. Look at your brother, always so handsome." But gradually, as the years passed, they escalated. And they not only criticized me for things I did wrong, but also used the things I did well to reproach me for not doing better. "Don't let it get to your head. I'm not that good, and you're not that bad." That's hard to believe when every moment of the day they make sure to remind me otherwise, as if instead of having 2 children, they only had 1. And the remaining teenager was just a random person they had to deal with out of obligation, never out of personal affection. Do you want me to talk to them? If you could do me that favor, they'll listen to you for sure. They always listened to Nicky, no matter what he said. So it was a surprise to discover that this turned out to be the exception that proved the rule. Nicky, who did try to fulfill the promise he had made to me and convince my parents to treat me better, was completely ignored when he brought up the issue. Not only did our parents change the subject as soon as either of us tried to call their attention to it, but once they got tired of giving us the runaround, they flat out told us that we were imagining things and that they loved us both equally. If they were stricter with me, to the point of giving me more chores at home than I deserved, it was only because they wanted the best for me and knew I could strive for more. They indulged Nicky in everything, giving him gifts and sparing him responsibilities, while burdening me with more work and reproaches that often had no basis. Why can't I sign up for guitar classes? I've gotten excellent grades in all my subjects, as we agreed I would. There isn't enough money. Besides, why would you do extracurricular activities? That's a waste of time. You have things to do at home. But the classes are free. The school provides them, and they even lend the instruments themselves.
Your father already told you no, you don't have time for those nonsense activities.
The curious thing was that there was always time and money to waste for Nicky. As soon as he showed interest in an activity, no matter how impractical it was, my parents went out of their way to make sure he could attend. And Nicky wasn't a bad person. He had shown that on numerous occasions when he tried to help me get a fairer deal. But he wasn't the perfect being. Everyone claimed he was either. My brother was too impulsive and indecisive. The activity that brought him pleasure today could hold zero interest for him the following week. It was inconvenient for me, but my parents seemed unfazed, blinded as they were by the halo of splendor they saw in Nicky. Needless to say, they didn't demand the perfect scores from him that they expected from me. At first, when I was very young, I tolerated this. But as I grew up and realized that instead of changing, the situation was escalating, my complaints became more constant, to the point that my parents were forced to confront me and punish me more often in an attempt to silence me. Why can't you be as calm and polite as Nicky? All you know how to do is complain.
If you're so unhappy in this family, leave. Anyway, you don't contribute much to the household. You're more of a hindrance.
The problem began with threats to refuse to pay for my university expenses and ended with my parents kicking me out of the house as soon as I turned 18. It was a terrible time for me. With nowhere to go and not enough money to sustain myself, I had to rely on all my ingenuity to avoid ending up on the streets. I survived thanks to the kindness of some friends who let me stay in their home until I could afford an apartment. I abandoned my educational opportunities in favor of getting a job to survive. And yes, after a few years, I managed to stabilize and start a new life away from parents who rejected me shamelessly. I lost contact with them, although I still occasionally spoke to Nicky, as he was the only one who still cared about me and even sent me some money in those first few months when I struggled to save enough to support myself.
Our parents are in debt. They're trying to hide it from me, so I don't worry, but I know what's going on. I'm not blind.
Let them dig themselves out of the hole on their own. They're old enough to know how to spend their meager fortune.
You know very well that they waste too much, and their carpentry business is about to collapse. Couldn't you lend them a hand now that you're doing well?
Why would I help them after everything they did to me? You helped them, since they treated you so well. Nicky did want to help, but contrary to what our relatives predicted, things weren't going so well for him in life. At 20, he had dropped out of university to take a gap year traveling around Europe, which my parents funded without sparing any expenses. And now that he was back in the country, he had taken on a part-time job at a fast food chain that obviously didn't pay very well. As for me, I had managed to stabilize my life and resume my studies. I got a job at a veterinary clinic, which provided me with a good salary and even allowed me to save some money. I had no interest in getting involved with my parents again, so I wished Nicky luck and completely washed my hands of the matter. It was several months later when I found out that my parents' financial problems had escalated to the point where they were about to have their car and house repossessed. The police had already knocked on their door, and from what I could gather, they were also being investigated for fraud.
It's all a mistake, Caleb. You must help us. We didn't realize the debts had piled up so much, and we needed the money to give you and Nicky a better future.
Only to Nicky, rather. And yet I can see that you've squandered a lot on indulgences for yourselves.
Don't be like that. We did everything we could to give you a good childhood. It's just that you were always a very rebellious child, always demanding more than we could give.
My parents begged for help, but beyond offering some advice, I didn't extend a helping hand. Everything I had built from the age of 18 until that moment was the result of my own efforts, and I wasn't going to let anyone convince me otherwise. However, other people weren't so forgiving. As it turned out, my parents had borrowed a great deal of money from people they knew and refused to pay them back. Some of those people were their customers or suppliers, and they owed tens of thousands of dollars to many of them. Some were so angry that they even spray painted the words "liar" on the side of my parents' house. On top of that, their home was broken into several times, and much of their belongings were stolen. Even their cars were broken into and stolen. For me, though, I never considered seeking revenge as such. However, things for my parents finally crossed the point of no return when they were finally arrested for embezzlement. After the police took them away, a local newspaper contacted me to interview me about them and my childhood. It may not have been my intention to publicly humiliate them, but by telling the truth about how they kicked me out of the house, that's exactly what happened. As for Nicky, well, I made sure to take care of him, and he moved in with me. In the end, I went from being a pariah, rejected by my own parents, to having free access to the family properties again and being seen almost as a hero in the media, while my parents had to serve a long sentence. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more stories. I was even more shocked when Lily came to us and told a shockingly fabricated story to everyone. It sounded so real that I would have believed it if I wasn't the victim. I cried and begged, but no one believed my innocence. After all, I was close to the kids. According to them, I was being close to them to perpetuate my evil act and sealed their mouths with the goodies I bought them. My parents were even more disappointed. There was no way I could prove my truth. The girl was too young to serve as a witness. Her parents were so angry that they wanted to call the cops on me. However, my grandparents and other family members begged them not to, as it would be too much of a disgrace. Instead, I was sent away. My whole family cut ties with me, my parents included. I left in tears, feeling betrayed and deeply hurt. Did you grow up with extended families? Well, I did, and I regret it. My name is Sam, and here's a story of how I was falsely accused by my cousin. I was 20 and hadn't gotten into college yet because I'd wanted to work before going. I finished high school 2 years ago and got 2 part-time jobs immediately after. I was paid quite well and was able to save enough. I had a female cousin, Lily, who loved being around with me. One day, we were discussing as usual when she asked if I'd ever been in a relationship, and I responded that I had. I had a girlfriend when I was 19. I liked her, maybe a little too much. We'd both liked each other since I was 17, but only confessed to each other when I was 19 and began dating. It went smoothly for about 6 months, but she suddenly broke up with me. Her excuse was me being a boring boyfriend. According to her, she needed an adventurous man. I begged her, even in tears, but she refused, and eventually broke up with me. It was a sad memory for me. I hadn't been able to like anyone else since our relationship ended. Lily asking me about it only brought back the painful memory. I recounted my experience to her, and she appeared so sad.
Wow. I can't believe a lady would leave a man like you. You're handsome, hardworking, and super intelligent.
All but adventurous. We shared a laugh as I made the joke.
I'll say it's her loss. She could have simply told you what she wanted to explore. I'm sure you would have allowed it.
Of course I did. I liked her a whole lot. Honestly, I still do. It was true. I still liked her a whole lot and felt sad about her leaving every now and then. Lily suddenly hugged me, catching me by surprise. She rubbed my back, assuring me that I would forget about my ex soon. I didn't think it was possible, but I believed her. After the hug, she also shared a story about her relationship. According to her, she'd been in 3 relationships all her 19 years of being alive. The last one had completely broken her, as she loved him the same way I loved my ex. Turned out we were both broken. We laughed it off and spent more time together that night before she returned to her room. We became even closer after that night. She would often visit me at my workplace and smile at me. It felt good to see her there. Sometimes she would wait until my break time and we would go to a cafe together, where we would talk about more things. Lily was a very interesting person. She always had topics to discuss. I didn't have any friends, so it felt good having someone like her. However, she began to act strangely with me after a few months of being close. She would hug me suddenly, holding me tightly. At first, I thought it was her being affectionate, but it soon became uncomfortable. I didn't like how she would snuggle into my neck when she hugged me. Even more, I was displeased with how she began visiting my parents' house at night to pass the night in my room. If she didn't cling to me all night while trying to kiss me and acting like she hadn't intentionally done it, I probably would have been fine. When I couldn't take it anymore, I decided to speak to her about it. I told her to stop visiting my workplace and my parents' house. She agreed, and we only began meeting at my grandparents' house, just like before. I still needed to stop the hug. When you hug me, let it be a brief one. Don't hold me too tight or breathe in my neck, it's uncomfortable. She'd seemed devastated, and I nearly felt bad, but I shook it off. It needed to be done. We didn't stop our regular conversations, but the excess physical contacts were stopped, and I was happy. One night, however, while we were stargazing together, Lily tried to kiss me. I quickly pushed her away. Are you insane? I'm your cousin.
What does it matter? It's just a kiss.
It matters because we're cousins. I'd appreciate it if you never repeat this. Excuse me. I was so angry at her that I refused to speak to her. I didn't return her calls, nor did I reply to her texts. She tried to speak to me when we next met at my grandparents', and I ignored her. I wanted to be alone for as long as possible. I felt she'd grown too attached to me and was confused, so I wanted her to calm down. However, Lily had grown hatred toward me because I was ignoring her. It wasn't after 2 weeks before I faced her wrath. I was in my room when my dad's younger sister stormed in, crying. I was worried at first, but she suddenly slapped me, making me confused. What did I do? She grabbed my hand and roughly pulled me outside, yelling at the top of her voice for everyone to come out. My cousins followed, and soon everyone was gathered in the living room. It was then that she revealed it.
Sam sexually assaulted my daughter.
I was shocked to my bones. Her daughter was only 5, and I loved the girl's smartness. I bought her things like the rest of the kids, but that was all. How could I have done such a horrible thing to her? I immediately protested, telling her I would never do such a thing.
Shut up, you liar! Lily told me everything. She saw you.
I was even more shocked when Lily came to us and told a shockingly fabricated story to everyone. It sounded so real that I would have believed it if I wasn't the victim. I cried and begged, but no one believed my innocence. After all, I was close to the kids. According to them, I was being close to them to perpetuate my evil act and sealed their mouths with the goodies I bought them. My parents were even more disappointed. There was no way I could prove my truth. The girl was too young to serve as a witness. Her parents were so angry that they wanted to call the cops on me. However, my grandparents and other family members begged them not to, as it would be too much of a disgrace. Instead, I was sent away. My whole family cut ties with me, my parents included. I left in tears, feeling betrayed and deeply hurt. I went very far away and started a new life. I got a new job, went to college, graduated with great results, and got an even better job. I'd put the past behind me a long time ago and focused on giving myself a good life and building my own family. One day, 20 years later, I got a call from a strange number asking to meet him somewhere. I went there the next day and met a very handsome boy. He looked around 17 and so familiar. He introduced himself as Lily's son and burst into tears. I was surprised and confused as to how he found me, but I comforted him regardless. Once he was fine, he confessed to me that he'd found out how I was chased out of the family. Lily had divorced his dad when he was only 10, and he'd been in her custody. She was an abusive mother. He told me how she always hit him at the slightest provocation, forced him to stop speaking to his friends, and also locked him up in the house whenever she had to go on long trips. Those were only a few among other things she did to him. What broke me completely was his next revelation.
She was drunk last week and told me about how she made the whole family hate and sent you away after she lied against you. I also recorded everything.
He played the recording, and a tear fell from my eyes. He also showed me all of the scars and fresh bruises she'd given him, which mostly happened when she was drunk. I couldn't take it anymore. I let the boy stay with me that night. The next day, I took him to the house I hadn't been to in 2 decades. It was a Saturday, so everyone was there. They were all shocked to see me. My grandparents had passed away, alongside some of my family members. The others had grown old. I cried when I saw how grown my siblings had become. They ran to hug me. My parents had forbidden them from searching for me when they were younger. And when they were grown adults and tried to search again, they couldn't find me. I was surprised to see my aunt looking sorry and unable to meet my gaze. I expected her to hate me. Anyway, I told everyone what Lily's son had told me. After that, I played the recording. Everyone was shocked and looked at her with judging eyes. My aunt also stepped forward and burst into tears. According to her, she'd known Lily lied 2 days after I left. She'd taken her daughter to a hospital, and there was no sign that she'd ever been touched. I couldn't find the girl around, so I asked where she was. My aunt's tears increased. A strange man had raped and killed the girl when she was only 15, and her dad had died 2 years after, leaving my aunt as a lonely old woman. I didn't feel sad for too long. She deserved it after ruining my life by not speaking up about her findings earlier. Because of her and Lily, I'd been so scared of going near children and even females. I was single man at 40 because I couldn't get into a relationship with a female for fear of being accused of something I didn't do. Anyway, I called the cops on Lily, who couldn't stop crying and begging me. She'd confessed that she did that because I rejected her advances. Everyone felt so irritated and angry. The police came and took her away. I asked her son to pack his things. While he went to do as I asked, my parents came to apologize to me. I forgave them, but I told them there was never going to be a close relationship between us, as they'd killed every closeness the day they believed Lily and my aunt's words over mine. I forgave the rest of my family. After hugging my siblings goodbye and giving them my contact, I left with Lily's son. Lily's co-workers happened to hear about what happened, and they expressed their disgust for her. At the court hearing, nearly all of them were present. I could see her trying to hide her face, but it wasn't possible. Not when her hands were cuffed. The court sentenced her to 15 years imprisonment for physical and mental abuse of her son. It was also discovered that she'd assaulted a young boy 2 years back and paid his mother to keep quiet. She got another 15 years for that. She was also made to pay for my therapy sessions and that of her son and the boy she assaulted. Someone had taken a video of it and posted it online where internet users had hurled all manner of insults on her. Once it was all over, I moved into another apartment with her son. I was going to raise him as my child and take care of him in the best way I could. I also hoped to be able to get married after I was done with therapy. Lily's son was there for me. He felt like he owed me something after what his mother had put me through, and also for taking care of him. Good boy, isn't he?